Prior to 1980, as a means of flotation, Custom Flex fastens styrofoam blocks under the floorboards or seats and under the foredeck. Also, to prevent turtling during a capsize, aluminum masts are filled with styrofoam. As evidenced from the pictures, when a boat capsizes, the foam keeps the fiberglass boat afloat but awash at the gunwale. It is virtually impossible to sail the boat out without outside assistance. Waves on a body of water such as Lake Erie, Sandusky Bay, and Maumee Bay definitely make self-rescue even more difficult. Keeping in mind that wood floats, the design of the Interlake incorporates a closed trunk, encapsulating the entire profile of the centerboard when it's in its raised position. When attempting to bail out the boat after a capsize, a closed trunk ensures water cannot gush into the boat through the centerboard slot. Interlakes equipped with seat-style decks with no floorboards allow for a more comfortable sitting position. However, a downside of the elimination of floorboards is the height of the trunk is effectively increased. Many owners, potential owners, and especially female crews voice concern about the difficulty of climbing over the trunk during tacks and jibes. Many opinions voiced concerning a possible solution modifying the height of the centerboard trunk in the Interlake result in two possible alternatives. Maintain the closed trunk by altering the profile of the centerboard. Eliminate the closed trunk, replacing it with a low-profile open trunk. Both ideas are ultimately rejected, as the first obviously would significantly change the sailing characteristics of the boat, and the second certainly makes recovery from a capsize more difficult. In 1980, Terry Kilpatrick undertakes the task of making the Interlake completely self-rescuing. With input from ISCA members such as Tony Burkhart, chief measurer at the time, a configuration utilizing a large bow tank and seat tanks is adopted. With this improvement, combined with Elfstrom bailers that are developed in 1964, the Interlake can now be righted and sailed out in 4-foot seas. Any tendency to turn turtle has also been eliminated. In 1986, Custom Flex offers a rear trunk extension. It's a reinforced rib and works in conjunction with the bow flotation tank as a dam, restricting the lateral movement of bilge water while heeling. Trapping the water on the high side, the windward bailer drains much more effectively as the boat heels. In the fall of 1986, the Interlake Sailing Class Association, along with the Sandusky Sailing Club, is chosen by U.S. Sailing to host their National Championship of Champions Regatta. 20 U.S. National Champions and/or North American Champions come to Sandusky to determine who is the best of the best. Taking advantage of relatively recent technology, 2 video cameras concentrating on mark groundings are used to record the event. In at least one protest meeting, these images proved to be very useful. Eight races are sailed in boats, all with narrow decks with short seats, equipped with new sails and pre-tuned tensions on standing rigging. Statistics are kept on the performance of rotating boats after each race. The stats conclude that no boat exceeds plus or minus 2 places of the overall finish of the competitors sailing each boat. In fact, after day 1, boat number 627, the oldest boat in the fleet, has the best record. The regatta is sailed in relatively heavy winds that on one of the days preclude spinnakers from being used in an attempt to protect borrowed boats from potential damage, as well as the investment of boat owners who pre-purchase new sails used in the event. Future Olympian Paul Forrester, representing the Flying Dutchman class, wins the regatta. Gun. Yeah. Flag went up. If you watch closely, you will see some interesting, but not recommended techniques used to handle the Interlake's 8-foot spinnaker pole at the jibe mark. In the late 80s, with market conditions limiting the building of new boats, Custom Flex continues to concentrate on refurbishing older boats by primarily adding racing hardware to Interlake's initially rigged for day sailing. The company also augments its revenue by manufacturing architectural components for both private enterprises and government agencies. In 1987, Interlaker Dennis Diebold opens Diebold Boat Works. Utilizing a small shop located on Toledo's north side, Denny also concentrates on restoring and fixing One Design sailboats. As a very active sailor participating in the Interlake Traveling Regatta circuit, he is well aware that many racing Interlake sailors would like to sail the boat with a no-seat deck. In response, Denny develops a design for a flat deck with a rolled-in shape from the gunwale to the opening of the cockpit. The basic design profile mimics the shape used by more recently designed sailboats such as the 470 and 420. By all indications, the design should prove to provide increased comfort, especially while hiking. Denny responds and retrofits Interlake 414 with his new deck built with wood. In 1989, sailing 414, Denny wins the Nationals. Based upon his racing success with the new deck, Diebold installs his wooden deck on a number of used hulls. In 1989, faced with diminishing sales, not only affecting the Interlake, but all classic One Design sailboats, including the Thistle, Highlander, Flying Scot, Rebel, Snipe, Flying Dutchman, Lightning, Comet, and Buccaneer, Terry Kilpatrick is forced to make a career change by becoming plant manager at Toledo Metal Spinning. Terry ultimately moves the Custom Flex operation from 1817 Palmwood to his home on Menor Road in White House, Ohio. Working out of two very efficient buildings on land adjacent to his home, boat building activity essentially becomes a nights and weekend affair. After Custom Flex moves from Palmwood, Terry is blessed to retain the services of longtime employee Mike Polasic, who with his brothers continues to lay up very high-quality hulls and decks, while Terry concentrates on rigging and assembly. In 1990, Custom Flex, with the endorsement of the ISCA Executive Committee, responds to the Diebold wood deck with the development of its version of a no-seat, flat racing deck. Terry takes advantage of the deck specification change accommodating the long seat deck proposal. This allows the forward edge of the deck to extend 1 foot past Station 10, extending the cockpit opening 7 inches forward. This provides easier access to the mast for spinnaker pole handling. The side deck area around the chain plates is widened slightly to provide more inboard surface for mounting jib fairleads. The cockpit edge has a chamfered corner that is designed to ease the stress on the back of the legs when hiking. And molded into the front edge of the opening is a ridge that will channel water from the foredeck away from the cockpit. In 1992, after observing a capsize, Ernie and Skip Diebold, along with Craig Kolchuk, take note of how high an Interlake equipped with flotation tanks floats. At Diebold Boat Works, with help from Father Denny, they remove a water-saturated trunk from Interlake number 562 and replace it with a cut-down trunk. Receiving a 1-year building exemption from the ISCA, Skip, Ernie, and Denny take the boat to many regattas in 1992 in an effort to show as many sailors as possible the proposed modification. The Interlake Sailing Class Association also grants the same exemption to Custom Flex to draft profile alternatives of a cut-down trunk. 1993 is a busy year for the Interlake Sailing Class Association's chief measure. A draft for a new alternative centerboard trunk specification is developed. It spells out the details of the profile and ensures the height of the open centerboard trunk shall be a minimum of 14 1/2 inches from the bottom of the boat. Testing has determined that just under 14 inches is the level of water inside a capsized boat equipped with flotation tanks. At the spring meeting held March 14, 1993, the open centerboard proposal is passed. In the next few years, many existing boat owners cut down their existing closed centerboard trunks. Also in 1993, the deck specifications of the Interlake are meticulously reviewed. There is a perception among existing boat owners that wood decks recently installed on existing Interlakes constitute an advantage in sailing performance and compromise the value of Interlakes that have not been similarly constructed or modified. Specifically, the ISCA asked members to review and comment on outline verbiage that allows the rebuilding of older Interlakes to continue while setting acceptable parameters for decks and cockpits that retain the character of the Interlake and do not unduly concentrate weight in the center of the boat. In 1994, after several revisions, a completely overhauled deck proposal that allows only fiberglass decks on boats with fiberglass hulls is passed by 71% of the Interlake Sailing Class Association members voting. 1994 also sees a perpetual trophy for the Interlake Traveler Series named in the honor of Vince DeMeo. Sadly, Vince passes away in 1995. In 2002, Custom Flex reworks and updates the mold that has been used to produce the short seat narrow deck introduced in 1960. Essentially, the forward edge of the cockpit opening is altered to copy the same area of the Custom Flex flat deck. Many of the more senior owners of boats prefer seats as they add additional comfort while heeling the boat to weather during downwind runs and or heeling the boat to leeward while sailing upwind in drifting conditions. On Friday, July 27, 2007, in conjunction with the Interlake Nationals, the Sandusky Sailing Club undoubtedly holds the most well-attended event in the club's history. A huge crowd gathers to celebrate the 75th birthday of SSC and the conception of the Interlake. Club legends Paul Coe, Norm Winkle, and Gene Brandel, along with Florence Butts, who won the 1937 Nationals, crewing for her husband George, tell stories and reminisce about days of old. Also in attendance is a gentleman's gentleman, George Fisher. For over 25 years, George conducts sailing seminars and produces videos talking about sailing and the Interlake. Mr. Ambassador is an appropriate description for the soft-speaking Mr. Fisher, who also wins 13 Interlake Nationals between 1979 and 2001. Unfortunately, in 2014, Terry Kilpatrick is involved in a very serious automobile accident. As a result of the accident, Terry's mobility is dramatically reduced. Shortly after the accident, Mike Polasic suffers a fatal heart attack. As a result of these tragic events, Terry makes a very painful decision to retire from the boat building business. The Interlake Sailing Class Association responds by seeking out builders focusing on the following considerations: capability, experience, staffing, facility, geographic location, commitment to one design, attitude toward class specifications, pricing, repair capability and capacity, transition plan. Fortunately, the class finds a relatively young entrepreneur who is the 2015 Interlake Traveler Series champion, as well as the 2015 National Champion. Mr. Wes Blazer, who grew up in Sandusky, is opening the doors of Weatherly Boat Works in Port Clinton, Ohio. Successfully showing his capabilities, building an Interlake alongside Terry at the Custom Flex shop in White House, the ISCA responds by awarding Weatherly Boatworks a license to be the official builder of the Interlake in January of 2017. It all starts with a pail of gel coat. Molds are polished to perfection. Gel coat is sprayed onto the mold, approximately 20 thousandths of an inch thick. The plywood centerboard trunk is prepped. Note that fiberglass has replaced the plywood in the area where the centerboard bolt will pass through the trunk. Balsa wood blocks are used to stiffen the horizontal surfaces of the hull and deck. Obtaining separation is accomplished by floating the hull out of the mold using water. With a little aid from a hoist, a brand new Interlake hull is born. Molded flotation tanks containing styrofoam are glassed into the hull. A base coat of gel coat is sprayed into the hull. The internal layer of gel coat is then speckled. The bow eye is a very important component of the Interlake. Internally, both the centerboard block and tackle and forestay are attached to it. The two halves of the rudder are pressed together until curing takes place. Instead of balsa, solid fiberglass blocks are used in the area where the mast will be stepped on the deck. Solid glass in this area withstands compression when heavy loads of rig tension and 20-to-1 vangs are transferred to the deck. Mounting pads of various turning blocks and through-deck fittings are placed and glassed to the deck. Various rigging systems including jib cloth tension, spinnaker pole topping lift, barber haulers, mainsail Cunningham, boom vang, as well as traveler center and height adjustment are installed. The majority of these systems are double-ended. By definition, classic one-design sailboats are not allowed to significantly change over time. That's what makes them one design. A comparison to the automobile industry might add some perspective. While incorporating new technologies, innovations, design changes, etc., in an attempt to keep up with changing market conditions, the following list contains some, certainly not all, of the automobile brands and/or manufacturers that have failed, going out of business over the last 60 years. It can be argued that while the Interlake never achieves national status as a class, in retrospect, its regional status, primarily in the states of Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana, might now be an advantage to the boat. Relatively short distances allow a very active and passionate group of sailors that make up the Interlake Sailing Class Association to often meet face to face with relative ease. The ISCA sponsors a national championship each year, sometimes attracting Interlake sailors living as far away as Texas and the West Coast. In addition, the ISCA organizes a highly competitive traveler series with the venues being relatively close to one another. The Interlake Sailing Class Association also sponsors a midwinter regatta, most recently being sailed in Florida. That being stated, in February of 2020, societies around the world became aware of the COVID-19 pandemic. The world's population is now being challenged with many unknowns, resulting in restrictions, stipulations, and procedures resulting in constrained normal human activity, affecting both global health and economic issues. In May of 2020, the Interlake Sailing Class Association unfortunately joined many other one-design classes that do not have a commercial builder for their boats. West Blazer announced Weatherly Boat Works has relinquished the license to be the official builder of the Interlake. West cited, regardless of class or size, dwindling demand for new sailboats has eliminated economies of scale. Specifically, the inability to procure small orders of vital purchased items, such as aluminum mast and boom extrusions, along with balsa blocks at a realistic price, was a major factor in this business decision. The option of inventorying relatively large quantities of these building components is simply economically unjustifiable. Very few products, with minimal changes to their original form, last and are still being enjoyed 90 years after their inception. The Interlake sailboat is an exception and will be continued to be enjoyed for years in the future as long as those sailing her communicate to others how much fun they are having doing so. Does your fiberglass Interlake or any other fiberglass boat really like water? The answer is an emphatic no. Fiberglass doesn't like sunlight either. What does your Interlake really like? The answer is a good cover. Gel coat is water resistant, not waterproof. If a boat is wet sailed, it is imperative that bottom paint be applied to the bottom. In today's world, very few Interlakes are wet sailed, and alternatively are stored on trailers or lifts. Boats can be effectively protected from the rigors of both sun and water if they are properly covered. Polyester resins naturally become more brittle over time with weakening molecular structure. Direct sunlight accelerates this process. Properly covering your boat will significantly delay gel coat haze and fading, as well as potential cracking in higher stress locations that is a result of a weakened molecular structure. Fortunately, today many very high quality paints are available and can be applied over faded hulls, restoring them to a like-new appearance. Restoring a boat that has been invaded by water is a much more difficult proposition. As previously shown, the Interlake has a balsa core layer in between the outer and inner layers of fiberglass in its horizontal surfaces. Water absorption in the hull usually occurs due to water pooling in the hull's bilge for a prolonged period. A boat increasing in weight is an early sign that a vessel might be taking on water. A useful tool in identifying suspected areas of water absorption is using a screwdriver and tapping suspected surfaces with the handle. Wet surfaces will produce a sound that resembles a thud. Confirmation can be obtained by using a water meter. If an area is damp, delamination will occur when the balsa breaks down or pulls away from the surrounding fiberglass substrate. Repairing delamination damage typically entails removal of the fiberglass surface to access and remove the inner wood. The area of greatest concern for water intrusion and/or delamination in an Interlake is the joint where the centerboard trunk meets the hull. Great care is taken in initial construction, with overlapping seams of fiberglass covering the surfaces where the trunk is fastened to the hull. Being the low point of the boat, water will naturally pool in this section. If left unattended, especially through multiple freeze and thaw cycles, water will eventually invade the balsa and/or the plywood core of the centerboard trunk, wicking up from the source. If your dry sail boat is equipped with bailers, open them when the vessel is not in use. A sure sign that water has invaded the trunk is the centerboard that refuses to be lowered. This is due to swelling and delamination of the trunk caused by water intrusion. Here's a picture of the top of an Interlake closed trunk. It has been removed to convert the trunk profile to an open design. Turn the same trunk over and the sight is pretty ugly. Obviously, moisture has invaded this trunk, but not from the usual suspected area of the bilge of the boat. When this boat was built, as standard equipment, it was supplied with a snubbing winch mounted on the top edge of the centerboard trunk. In succeeding years, when ratchet blocks were introduced to aid trimming the jib, the snubbing winch on this boat was removed. From the pictures, it is obvious moisture entered the screw holes that were poorly or possibly not filled with caulk. Any non-used screw hole anywhere in the boat should be filled with caulk. When mounting new hardware, anywhere on the boat. Fill the hole with caulk before driving home the screw. Wiping off excess caulk is a whole lot easier than what you will see next. The following pictures are of number 952. This boat was stored, covered on a trailer, with the bow raised to a point where any water making its way inside the hull flowed toward the open drain plug in the transom. Leaves, finding their way to the bilge, eventually blocked the drain plug opening, causing water to pool in the rear of the boat. Delamination was evident on approximately 25% of the hull going forward from the transom. The first step is removing the deck from the hull. The inner layer of fiberglass is cut and removed to determine the extent of the damage. Water-soaked balsa, weighing over 55 pounds, is removed. The pool of water also compromised the trailing edge of the centerboard trunk, as well as the styrofoam blocks in the seat flotation tanks. Exposing the foam requires approximately half of each tank to be removed. To maintain a fair surface to the hull, milled lateral stringers are attached to the bottom using hot melt adhesive. Fiberglass mat is laid over the area where the wet balsa has been removed. New balsa blocks are installed and covered with a layer of fiberglass mat. New styrofoam blocks are cut and fitted. The portions of the seat tanks previously removed are glassed back into the hull. A dam extending from the trailing edge of the trunk to the transom is installed to prevent lateral movement of bilge water while sailing. A base coat of gel coat is sprayed over the repaired area and then speckled to match the unaffected interior surface of the hull. A fiberglass Interlake, as well as most other fiberglass boats, still contain many wood components. Some manufacturers, instead of using balsa, employ alternative core materials. If subjected to moisture, whatever is used eventually will react negatively. One last thought. Remember what is used today to effectively separate a new Interlake hull from the mold. Water. Water introduced between two layers of gel coat aids separation of the two surfaces. Bottom line, keep water and sun away from your boat when it is not being sailed.